Hello, everyone. Welcome to Practical Predictions. We're at the top of the hour. We'll be starting soon. We'll let people have a couple more minutes to join, and we'll start in the next 60 seconds or so. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day wherever you are around the world. I think we have people joining us from across Europe, some in Asia, and even a few early risers in North America. So we'll give people a few more moments to join us. And once again, welcome to Practical Predictions. We will be starting here shortly, and thank you for joining us today for this discussion. We'll give attendees another 60 seconds or so to start, and we will soon be taking you on a tour of artificial intelligence in FP&A. Hello, everyone. Just a reminder that we are here at Practical Predictions webinar, and we will be starting shortly. We'll give attendees just a few more moments to join, and we will soon be starting our presentation. It's just a minute after the hour, and we will give people another 30 seconds or so, and then we will start. It's important to stay hydrated, so you'll see me drink water occasionally through the webinar. And we're excited to be talking to you about machine learning and FP&A. All right, it's 2 past the hour. Why don't we go ahead and get started? A few housekeeping items. As you can probably tell, everyone is in mute mode, and as you go along and questions arise, please type them into the questions window. We will try to answer as many as we can at the end of the session. And if we're unable to answer your question in real time, we will follow up with you after the webinar. The agenda of what we're going to talk through today is AI in finance. We'll go through a few case studies, and then my colleague Wolfgang will give a demo of our approach to using AI with the Office of Finance. A little about myself. I am Aaron Kuhnt. I am part of the solutions marketing team here at Jedox, and Wolfgang von Loper is one of our senior consultants and has 10 years experience working with artificial intelligence. So he has been at the forefront of this effort for many years. And a little bit about Jedox, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we have about 2,500 customers worldwide. We're entering our 3rd decade of working with the Office of Finance, and customers of ours really appreciate our service, and we tend to be highly rated among analysts, and we get lots of accolades from our customers, which we're very proud about. So let's dive into the content. This is a quote that I found reading the Wall Street Journal, a US paper, last week, and I think it's a really great quote. I'm just going to read it to you, but I'd like you to read it as well. You can't drive a car with mud on the windshield. Once you clear that away, you can go a lot faster. This is from a VP of Finance at Google, Kristen Renke, and this is a really great quote that encapsulates many of what we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's a crazy world out there, political instability, economic changes, all sorts of new M&As and new customers. Lots and lots of data is created by our businesses and our lives, and that can be kind of messy, and our job is to really try and clear that away from the windshield so we can go faster. And a few definitions. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. It's out of an ebook that Jedox produced with Microsoft, and we will include a link to this ebook for people when we send the archive. But what we're going to be covering today is something called supervised machine learning, which is really where data and humans interact to increase the accuracy of models over time. And some of the applications of that type of machine learning are segmenting customers, looking for churn analysis of customers, as well as making forecasts and predictions, which we'll be covering quite a bit with the demo later on. I would love to just briefly talk about a few misconceptions about AI in finance. One that we hear often is that our scenario planning is enough. And I would argue that just the fact that you're on this webinar means that you're looking to explore new ways to improve your operations. If you believe that there are no gaps in your process today, then everything is perfect and we will carry on with our merry way. But doing nothing and staying within the status quo is a risk in and of itself. So we really appreciate you joining us today, and hopefully you will start to see how the status quo isn't enough for both you and your business. Another misconception is, and this is very prevalent, not just in the Office of Finance, but across the world and in every profession, that I'm going to lose my job to AI. And I would argue that yes, for certain types of mundane tasks and rote tasks, AI may take some of those positions away. But the promise of AI is really to allow people to focus on higher level analysis and get rid of the drudgery of mundane tasks and really focus on the higher level analysis that we all love to do. And then another is really that AI is just not ready for prime time. And big companies like Google, Microsoft, they've deployed machine learning and AI in many applications. The maps that we use to get from point A to point B use artificial intelligence to help us navigate. And even Microsoft has built accessibility options in PowerPoint to make content and information more accessible to different types of people. And many companies are using AI in finance today, and we'll talk about a few of those in a little bit. So a few applications or use cases that are available to AI within the Office of Finance is testing hypotheses. Are there certain drivers that impact our business more than others? Are there external data sources like weather data or gas prices that we can bring into our models that might affect our business? We need to test those hypotheses. Also, really being able to speed up decision making. So what am I not seeing in my model today? What happens when I look at all of my data? And ultimately, it's about making quicker, more accurate planning. And then another is triggering actions based on data. So for instance, if you've got are there customers that are at risk of churn? Can I see that in my predictions and take actions based on that? Do I need to produce more to meet the demand from a forecast that's generated by AI and machine learning? And even actions that are from consolidated cash flow predictions from multiple entities that are rolled up into global enterprises. So there's many different use cases for AI today. So going back to Kristen, they actually are using machine learning to make forecast predictions, and they're finding that their machine learning assisted forecasting generate accurate forecasts about 80% more accurate in 80% of the cases. So that is very optimistic and very aspirational and gives us a hint of what is possible today. And now let's do a quick poll of the audience. And really just would love to understand if you could find a method that gets you accurate forecasts 80% of the time, would you actually entertain that? And we'll give people 20 seconds to enter their yes or no answer. Hopefully we'll get close to 100% on the yes side. We'll give people another 5 seconds. And if we could go to the results, let's take a look to see if what people are saying. Yep, it looks like 100%. This was probably a very easy question for everyone, but definitely we're always looking for more accurate forecasts. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So we're wondering if we can do better than 80%. One case study, Apex Hotels, one of our customers here in Europe, they did a multivariate prediction and looked at different drivers of their business, including things like weekends, holidays, local events, different market segments that they had. And they were actually able to generate forecasts with accuracy up to 99%. They were able to remove some of the human bias in their forecasting process, and they were able to make much quicker decisions based on the forecasts that they were seeing. Let's do another quick poll, and really would love to hear from you. Are you incorporating any data from outside sources today with your models? And answer yes, no, don't know. Again, this one will probably have more variation than the last, but we'll see what people think. We'll give people another 5 seconds to answer, and let's go ahead and take a quick look at the results. Keep moving so we can get to the demo. Interesting. So this again, this group here today looks like there is some opportunity to really bring in different types of data, see what drivers are affecting your business. And it's exciting that there is opportunity for us to get better at our models over time. All right, a second use case that I'll just briefly go through is Mitsui Chemicals. And they took about 1.5 years of historical data from their products and ran AI in parallel to their manual forecasting process. And they ended up with getting 95% accurate forecasts with a 12-month rolling average. And really what for them, they were able to free up time for their finance professionals to focus on the analysis and the decision making as opposed to building models. And then lastly, an internet provider in the US, they actually used AI with some sales performance management initiatives that were corporate initiatives, and they were really focused on trying to unify the sales organization targets for both multi-unit and retail teams. And this was a combination of top-down and bottom-up planning. And what they were able to accomplish is really set a set of benchmarks that they were able to then use for their teams as they were tracking towards plan. And ultimately, it was more accurate forecasting. So regardless of where you are in your evolution, AI can support in automation, in better collaboration with your teammates and getting more people involved in planning, and then ultimately the digital transformation that we are all part of today. And with that, I think we're going to switch it over to Wolfgang to take us through AI Assist.
Yes, thanks, Aaron. Okay, let me just click here. Share my screen. You should be able to see my screen now, is that correct?
Yes,
cool.
We can see your screen, Wolfgang.
Good, great stuff. Yeah, so I'm very glad to have you guys all here. I'm looking forward to show you what we can do. For me, myself, I've actually been in finances and controlling for almost 20 years. I might not look like it, but I have studied business economics, and later on, for the last 10 years, actually, I've been involved quite heavily in AI and big data analytics, did my master's in economic modeling. And yeah, today I'm here at Jedox. and we'll present what we actually do. For me, it's quite important that you put your mindset around, we've had AI and it's been a lot of theory around it and a lot of marketing hoo-ha. And what does that practically mean for you guys in the real world going forward? Where is AI taking you? And that's what the intention is really today, to take you a little bit on that road of what that future may look like, because it's already real, it's with us. My colleague Aaron just showed you a few case studies that have been deploying it. And I want to show you practically how do we do it for you. So what we've got here on the screen is a strategic planning report. And what we would like to get to in the end, in the next few minutes, is actually a balance sheet, but I'll more focus on the cash flow, is to get a cash flow report. Something like this, you can see it's all empty. We have got the first 3 months of actual values in here already, and we want to do a forecast for the rest of the year. And we want to do a forecast based on different scenarios. But the first thing I'd like to sort of highlight here, and that's the real mindset, because you can see we logged in as John Johnson. John Johnson here is our CFO in this case, and he's got the problem of, let's take that anecdote of the muddy windshield, the quote from the Google guy. We've got all this stuff flying at us, whether it's a lockdown coming our way or lockdown stopping. Consumers have saved up money, suddenly they're consuming like wild again. Then there's the next lockdown coming, or some international trade collapsing because of some country. We all know the things that are coming our way, and it becomes incredibly difficult to really accurately predict and your forecast. And that's where AI really can come in, especially if you include some of the drivers, which I'll be showing you how we also operate that in under the hood. But let's put ourselves now into the shoes of John Johnson here. He's got he wants to start a prediction in order to run, and here you can see the 3 months of actual values again, and he wants to do a forecast for the rest of the year. So what's happening now, it's running that algorithm, and if we look under the hood, what's really happening is that we have trained that algorithm that's running now with these different drivers. So in this case, there's stock indices, raw material price index, currency rate projection. Okay, we can see here it's already finished running the model, which is great. And you can see here that there's a scatter graph that shows you why did we choose these drivers to be part of the algorithm and train it up using it, because the impact of each of these drivers is relatively high. And that's why we've used them as part of the analyst, as part of the strategic forecast or the algorithm. Now, what you can see here is that we have got a prediction, and we've got an upper bound and a lower bound. So it projects as well, a best or an upper and a lower bound for us to give us a guideline when we plan different scenarios. Where would we possibly like or go above or below it, and would maybe want to avoid it, or at least there's some guideline for us. Then here we've got our scenarios that we will be running through now, and at the bottom we've got a mini P&L. You would have seen this was completely empty a minute ago, so it's already populated the prediction into here, and we'll run a strategic, best, and a worst case scenario. So let's pull in the strategic. And for the strategic, we've got, or for all of these scenarios, we've got different initiatives. Let's say we expect a key account next year of the 2 million, that's definitely going to come and happen. So we would definitely like to see that in here. And if we look at the graph here, we've got our strategic graph here. You can see it suddenly going up towards at the end of the year here in December. If I take it out, you can see the 2 million disappearing. This initiatives, we've got a very simple interface to actually create these initiatives. It's basically self-explanatory almost here. If I say, okay, let's, for example, plan 20 million in here, we've got these wonderful little short commands that help us with our planning. We use them, whether you use them in an interface like this or in Excel, it doesn't matter. You can use these short commands. We've also got a planning assistant that will help you with general planning. You've got much more features and options to plan here. But but I'm not going to dive into that now. But you see we've got 20 million in here. If we close that, you'll see how it's skyrocketing here. So these initiatives, you can add new initiatives or edit the initiatives that you've got here, which makes it very convenient and easy for you to run through different scenarios. Let's go and put this back to 10 million. So we're back to the original of 2 million there. And now let's plan for the best case scenario. So best case scenario, we might say, okay, there's a site closure because of a corona outbreak, or just a site closure that saves us 28 million. We might also say, okay, we to move an investment in the first year and add that in here. And there we can already see the best case scenario is higher than our upper prediction. We can then say, okay, maybe we're exaggerating here. We want it closer towards the prediction. Then it's up to us to say, okay, are we going to exceed what the prediction tells us in the upper limit? What it may be, we can decide that ourselves as CFO, whether we want to run that scenario like that or not. Let's plan for the worst case. Worst case scenario, let's say shortage in the supply chain is something realistic, which we all experience probably at the moment, the shortage in the supply chain. And we've got our worst case down here. Now, you can see it would have populated the mini P&L down here. So we'll have our gross profit and profit loss from operating activities. And what we have got now, we've got this little P&L, and what we would like to do is project this P&L into the balance sheet and the cash flow, and we do that through our projection. And what happens here is we've got this projection interface, which is you just set that up once. You don't need to do it every time. You basically, just to explain it quickly, let's base it off the product revenue P&L account. You'll have the P&L account here, and you book that into a balance sheet account. And when you book it into a balance sheet account, you also say when the terms and conditions of when people maybe, or your clients will actually pay you. You could say after the first month, it could be 70, and in the second month, the rest 30. You can have more full. This is just a very simple, for our demo purpose, we don't have a big logic here, but behind this, there could be individual tables, even linked up to your bookkeeping system to book in your credit details of your creditors and debtors. We don't have that here because, it is just for demo purposes. Once you've booked it into your balance sheet account, it's actually booked also into your liabilities, taxes, in Germany here, we've got 19%. We book it into the taxes and liabilities, and then also tell it it's 3 months terms for payment of the tax, and then ultimately it's booked into the cash flow account. So once you've set this up, you basically run this procedure, and what it does now, it takes the P&L and rebooks everything from the P&L into the balance sheet account and into the cash flow account. It takes a few seconds, and it's done now. And if we have a look at our balance sheet, we'll have our numbers here in the balance sheet report popping up because we projected them in there. And if we look at the cash flow, which was a few minutes ago still empty, this is now all populated. You can see the strategic forecast here, and you can select between the different scenarios, your best case or your worst case scenario. So that's basically from the perspective of a CFO. He can run through different scenarios very quickly, use the AI to help him guide where it's going, and we do predictions as well to 24 and 36 months. We've seen some very nice, accurate predictions, even up to 36 months. It obviously then depends on what type of input data you have, but we've seen that. But what I'd like you to do now, we'll log out here and close this, because I'd like you to put yourself now here into the shoes of the head of planning or head controller. So this is a different scenario now. The financial director might have said, okay, guys, I've run some scenarios. I've got a prediction here. It's all cool, but we'd like in the next week or so to actually have a more accurate prediction with human input. So where we try and get the best of both worlds, the prediction and human input. And how can we speed that up? And that's by using actually AI to help the planners. So that's what we're doing here now. We're going down one level and say, okay, how can we get AI to assist the planners practically? So head of planning will go and say, okay, I'm going to run the prediction. It's going to start it. So what it's doing now, this time it's not using a driver-based prediction, but what you're seeing here now is okay, here it's already done. That was quite quick. What it did, it actually ran against these 3 prior years. You can see here we've got the first 3 months of actuals already in, and it's now predicted the next 9 months, also with a lower and upper bound here, lower and upper bound as confidence interval. And you see in this case, it actually used the ARIMA AI model as the most accurate one. It did run through all other optional models and machine learning algorithms, but it actually selected the one that's most accurate, in this case, 96%. And now that the head of planning knows, okay, I've got this prediction, I want my planning colleagues to use that as a template to make their life easier. So he can go and start a workflow. This interface, which we've got here, basically you start a workflow. So what happens now, the planner shoots off a workflow, which now is going to send out an email to all individual planning colleagues who've got different rights and different responsibilities for different regions. They'll get their email with a request to actually do their planning. And that's what we're going to do now. So now I'd like you, sorry, I'm challenging you a bit. You're putting yourselves into different shoes here, but I think that's quite important, because if we want to look at it from a practical perspective, we want to look at it, from different point of views. So what we've got here, okay, I've got a PayPal coming in here, sorry. But here we've got the Jedox email coming in as well. So this is now the email of our planner. We're now in his shoes. He just got this email less than a minute ago with a direct link to log in to Jedox. And this time we're not going to log in as John Johnson, but we're actually going to log in as Stephen. And that will take him directly to that report only. So he doesn't get too much selections. There's no menu, just get access to that report. And you can see here already, his responsibility and his rights of access, or role-based access control, only gives him access to this company, to Germany, and to bicycles. So he's responsible for that, and he wants to, okay, you can see here he's a German, so language, you can have planners in different countries and they set up it according to their language. So Fahrräder is bicycles, and Rennräder is road bikes. Sorry, I should have probably changed that before the demo here, but yeah, maybe you can see
it's
that.
perfect. It shows that, the 21 languages that we support, there are planners all over the world, and part of the idea is getting collaboration across the world.
Yeah, so the language setting works quite well. You can see it here by accident. Okay, but he can obviously also drill down into the different products that he's responsible for. And if he's not responsible for race bikes, he wouldn't be seeing this. But in this case, he actually is. And let's say he wants to use the Cross Silver, or let's choose maybe the Silver 44, and he's got a marketing campaign for September, which now, and you can see here, we've got the predictive input here. So the prediction is here, the AI prediction. It's used it as a template. He can choose from different template, but he leaves it with that one, simply because that was the template that head of planner wanted me to use as a guide. Now I know the AI is going to predict 800 for this area. I'm happy with the other numbers, and I'm going to keep it simple for the purpose of this demo here. But here in September, there is a marketing campaign that the AI does not know about. So let's let's put in here 2,000 units instead of 800, because we predict that that's going to be the result of a marketing campaign, and it throws us a warning. The reason why it throws us a warning here is because it is the 2,000 is out of the bounds of the confidence interval from the AI, which now, requests me to actually put a comment here. So I'll just say marketing, but because of the marketing campaign, and adding that comment will help now all other colleague planners who actually look at my numbers see, okay, here's something, an outlier, here's something else planned, which the AI obviously didn't know about, but there's a comment that I leave. And then he basically goes and submits it through this form here. But we're not going to submit it now. Well, we could, but he's basically, when he's finished, he submits his report, his budgets or his forecast, and then, yeah, he can go and delete the email. Yeah, so that's how basically we use the workflow in combination with AI to help planners plan, and they don't plan with empty numbers. They've actually got something that helps with prediction.
And Wolfgang, just quickly, I mean, that one thing that I really like about that last example is it shows the interaction and the feedback that a human gives to the AI model. So it is working together to produce better results for the company.
Yeah. So AI here becomes like a little bit of a crutch. Like Aaron said, it doesn't replace jobs. It really helps people to plan faster and quicker. Okay, so let's go now. What I would like us to do is go and have a look at how do we work all of this under the hood? How does this practically work if you want to use an AI? You've seen now the deployment, how a CFO uses it, how a planner uses it, and how a head of planning uses it. And you've got multiple different scenarios where you can use it as well. And what we're going to do now is say, okay, how do we set up something like this? Because that's the next big question. For most people out there, it seems like this foggy thing on the horizon, and we don't know how to get there. But that's where Jedox really comes in with its wizards. And here we've got a time series prediction wizard, which basically takes one input driver and predicts using that. We've got driver-based prediction, which uses different drivers, which I'm going to demonstrate now here. And then in order to get to these two, we actually have a data preparation and a data analysis. Now, the driver analysis helps us actually identify which of the drivers are actually useful and are helpful for making accurate prediction, because you will want to know, okay, I've got a few commodities or different drivers I'd like to test them and see which ones give me the accurate prediction. That is what the driver analysis does. But in the driver-based prediction, we'll also have a look at which AI algorithm then is also the best to use. And that's what we're going to do now. So let's dive in. And have a look at, okay, it's already selected here now, but you basically have access here to all the different databases that you have in Jedox in your system. And I'm just using the AI COVID demo data because we've got some COVID data there. And you can see I've already run a scenario, but what we're going to do is just copy this scenario. Let's call it scenario 2, copy that, and it creates another scenario for me to now edit and change it. But basically, you can have many different scenarios here. It really doesn't matter. And as you run through the different scenarios, you suddenly get a good feeling for what the data really tells you and what it looks like. But we'll do it now here in our edit. So we're editing this scenario. And what we have here is a source of data that ends up in a target. So we want to target sales. So we've already selected here sales to be the target. We want to predict the sales, and the source are the actual values of these different measures, or in this case, drivers. So we have here COVID cases, marketing promotions, newspaper advertising. Those are things we did internal. So those are internal drivers that we have. Stock index obviously is an external driver. Oil GDP change is an external driver. So we select all of these and pick those and use those to find out, which ones is actually most accurate. And we leave this. We can also select to run the model on north or south only. But for the purposes here, we'll just leave it at all regions. Before we started, we can actually have a look at the source data. The reason why we have it here, because you want to go and have a look at the source data to see whether there are massive outliers or big gaps. You don't want big gaps in your data because then it will struggle. If there's small little gaps, that's fine. You'll see just now. But if there are massive outliers or big gaps, then it will struggle to do the prediction. So you can look at the quality of the data before you actually run it. In the next step, you actually, then you just can say save and execute. So what it does now, it will run this model. This one should be finished already because I ran that one yesterday, I think. This might take a few minutes here to run, but we didn't do any changes. This one is exactly the same scenario. If we look at it, you can see here, we've got COVID cases with a scatter graph. That's a pretty linear one, which is quite useful. If we look at that, there's also a slight S curve here. Stock index is like a little bit more all over the show. And you can already see here on this impact graph, which one of the drivers actually have the big impact. You can see that especially the two down here. And then we've got another algorithm, view significance, the significance of how important it is or how significant that driver is to use. And it actually ejects these two, stock index and GDP change, not to use. So if we look at these ones, you can see there's some correlation on the graph. But if we go here, it's like all over the show. And that's why it's telling us not to use these two. So what we have
Wolfgang,
now,
just to add in quickly, I mean, this is really about testing your hypothesis and which drivers are actually affecting your business, right?
yes. So from this one here, let's see. This one's now done as well. So you see it takes usually a few seconds, sometimes a minute. Usually it's faster than that. We've got the same results here. Oh no, this one's not. Yeah, this one, here. Yeah. There's got to find out why the significance not showing here. But here in this case, here you can definitely see, which ones of the drivers do impact your business. Those are the ones you want to use for the prediction. And now that we know there are two of them that we do not want to use, we can go back and say, okay, we've done the driver analysis. We know which ones to use. Let's do the driver-based prediction now. We actually want to run the prediction. Here we can select from any. We'll obviously choose our COVID database again, and this time we say new setup. What it does here on the new setup, initially it validates your database, finds out whether your database can be used for prediction, because it does need a time dimension, a version, and a measure dimension. If those are not available, you can't use it, but that's basically your model setup. If you don't, our modeler helps you setting it up, and it's very intuitive as well how to set that up, those different dimensions. It's not difficult. Then you just go and say, okay, confirm this to use this, and there's a helpful little button here, say select or set as defaults. It will guess the best values and populate it. Again, we've got the source, we've got the target. The target is going to this time be a prediction, and the prediction obviously should be sales again. So pick sales, we want to predict sales, and we want to use not the variance, we actually want to use actuals. So the actuals, and this time here we've got those drivers again. So we're going to select all of them except stock index and GDP change. Sales we don't, because with sales we predict, but we leave out these two because we know they don't have a good impact on the prediction. We do have our COVID data from January 2020. So I know that data is available in the database. So I'm going to select those months where it actually has data for COVID. So here it's till January 20 this year. We leave it all regions again. I didn't mention earlier, you can also run for different regions, individual regions, but you can also select to let it run on base elements or the hierarchies up. So depends. If you go base elements, it can take a bit longer, which we're not going to do now because I want it to run fast. We can view the source data again, but we've just looked at it, so we don't need to do that. But you've got that button here again, and we say next. And let's actually predict 18 months. And so we want to predict for 18 months. And here we've got the different AI algorithms. So we can choose individual AI algorithms to run, or we can say choose best. Now, what best does, it will actually run against all of them and choose the best one and tell us which one of these is the most accurate, and yeah, then chooses that. And for that, we want to create the accuracy cube, because the accuracy cube will help us analyzing that afterwards. And then we can basically say, yeah, save it. We can save and execute, or save it here and then execute it here. So let's execute it because we actually want to let it run. So while we're waiting for that to run in the background, I just quickly want to show you this see more in video. So you might have seen it a few times now already. This is a little nice breadcrumb you can pick up when you're not sure how to use this. So sometimes you might be going back and training the AI again 6 months after you've done it before, and you think, oh, okay, I'm not too sure what happened or how to do it, or but this one is a nice little video explainer across different locations of the different wizards. So each wizard is obviously slightly different, and this little video explainer will help you to get up to speed quickly again if you forgot something, or some time might have passed since you did it last time, and you will find them here. So let's click here, see what the status is. Okay, let's finish again. So it's run the model. Let's look at the results. Okay, so from the results, we can see that actually linear regression in this case with 82.36% was the most accurate model. And what you can also see here is that the COVID cases has got a gap in June, but it still does the prediction. So the AI will still run if there's multiple drivers to base off from. If there's a single gap in one of them, it will still run it. If the back gaps are too big, it will actually show you a gap here too. But here it still modeled that number because it's got the other drivers, like oil and your marketing campaigns to use to still continue with the prediction. And if we look at all months, we actually get a nice overview of the historic data and yeah, the forecasted data. If you want to see the detailed values behind it, you can drill down and have a look at the actual and the comparison and the prediction. And yeah, that actually already brings me to the end of my part of the demo. We're obviously here to help you with your questions. So I'm going to give my screen back to my colleague.
Actually, why don't you keep your screen there, because it's a
Oh, okay. Yes.
a pretty chart, and we can keep your screen. Let me give you back. I'll give it back to you. But as we are, people are asking questions right now. There are a few, and I know we're already close to 45 minutes, so we'll only have time for a couple questions. So please make sure that you put questions into the question window so we can follow up with you afterwards. But a few of the ones that came in earlier in the session, this one is kind of interesting. At what hierarchy level does Jedox natively predict?
Yeah, if I can show you, yeah, let's go into this edit function here. So the AI will natively, if you select natively, it will always run against the parent hierarchy, the parent elements, and not the child elements or the base elements. That's quite important to understand, that if you've got, if it does the prediction at a higher level, it will splash the numbers down, but it will use historic data to splash in ratio to what has happened in the past, to similar like we do in our planning interface. It will splash it down in ratio to what is. So it's not going to take 12 months and just divide it by 12, or take 5 different products and divide it by 5. It knows that beer, for example, or bicycles or race bikes is different to mountain bikes, and it will splash it accordingly. So natively, it runs it against the nodes. and all regions, but what you can do is now select, for example, run it against North, and you pick that, and then you could say also run it against all base elements of North. Then it will actually do the predictions on lower levels, but what often happens is that the more detailed you drill down and let the AI run on there, you've got less data, and it tends to sometimes show outliers or some odd results. That's just the nature of how AI works. But generally, you also, we tend to often go and say, let it run at higher levels. But the option, if you've got a lot of data on the base elements, you can actually run it on the base elements as well. But just the way the cube, the AI is set up, it populates a massively big cube as well. If you say all regions against base elements,
Okay.
even though for each base element there is less data to be accurate, but it's going to run through all base elements, and that subsequently causes a lot of data. So sometimes and that's the reality, that's what these wizards are really here for, is you can play around and see which one of the combinations gives you the highest, best results, and then you use that results and start implementing that into the reports, like I showed you earlier on for the CFO, for example.
Let's do two more if we can, just quickly, and then we'll wrap up. Here's a good question. How many months of data historical data are needed for training the algorithms?
Generally 36 is what we would like to have, 3 years of data. But then it also depends on how the structure of the data is, and if it's shorter, for example, so you can have 2 years of data. You saw now we were using COVID data. COVID data for 2 years only, but we had the other drivers, so it's not complaint. The AI will spit out if you take a time series prediction. So if we go back and say, okay, we didn't do the time series, we did driver based, but time series prediction. Now you've only got one data set to model, and if you go then less than 2 years, it will tell you this is going to not give you good results. But the AI will analyze the data and tell you what best to do. So that's what the wizards are there for, ultimately.
Great. Yeah, let's do one more, and this one I think is kind of a inherently optimistic question. But when do you think AI will be broadly adopted? What are you seeing with customers?
Yeah, that's a challenging question, a good one. I think in my mind, and I've been involved with AI for the last 10 years. In this case, in the past, a lot with agricultural data, farming data, and especially for farmers, they just want like one number. They want to react, they don't analyze graphs. And we did some incredible work there in really simplifying and warning them about particular instances of disease and pest. So there, it was actually quite far. It's still in the early shoes. So I think at this point in time, here you can see the wizards on the screen. These wizards ultimately make it far easier to deploy our reports where you can embed these. The AI makes it far easier to use. So I think it's actually getting ready very soon for the broad-based business to use, not only for Google and Microsoft to spend tens of millions or hundreds of millions on it. It actually is now ready for us as a society to deploy it in businesses. And yeah, so I think there's still a lot to learn for all parties, and we are radically upgrading our AI like crazy. It's probably the department where things leapfrog forward. It's like crazy, the development. Literally, a colleague of mine is releasing a new version, something on the data preparation one. It's coming out tomorrow. So tomorrow's webinar for the US, we'll actually have a new version of the data preparation wizard, but that's how fast we actually innovate in Jedox. It's moving quite fast because it's now getting viable in my mind.
That's great, and really a great way to end the session. And we really appreciate everyone from around Europe and around the world that tuned in today. And it was an exciting conversation. Thank you, Wolfgang, for taking us through that entire demonstration. And we look forward to you joining us for the next one. We'll send the archive and along with a link to the white paper. And have a great rest of your day.
Good. Thank you.